Hey, HOA. We're going to continue with our discussion of the course of the U.S. Civil War, moving on to 1863. And just a reminder, here's our guiding questions that we are trying to come up with answers to. Okay, so at the start of 1863, things are gradually moving in the Union's direction. The blockade is strengthening. The Navy's acquiring additional ships and being better able to seal off trade from the Confederates. Also, the Union Navy is gradually taking control of the Mississippi River, according to the Anaconda Plan, in two directions. There are sort of the ocean-going Navy is working its way up from New Orleans, up the Mississippi, and the River Navy is making its way down the Mississippi and gradually getting more and more control. And this is going to be important because it's going to cut off Texas and Arkansas from the rest of the Confederacy when that process is complete. The Union Army has got most of central Tennessee by virtue of moving down or up the Tennessee River. Confederates are pretty much holding the lines in Virginia. The on to Richmond strategy has so far been unsuccessful. But the Union Army is continuing to increase its numbers, and importantly, there's no real end in sight. Nobody appears to be either winning or losing this war. Now remember, victory for the Confederates is pretty much the Union is going to get tired of this and give up. They're not expecting to, take full possession of Northern Territory. Victory for the Union is increasingly, at least in Lincoln's mind, defined as taking the Confederate armies off the field, destroying them, capturing them, whatever, figuring that once the Confederates no longer have the ability to militarily resist, the Confederate government is going to fold up pretty quick. But neither one of those things appears to be immediately on the horizon at the start of 1863. All right, so on January 1st, 1863, Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation is going to take effect. He pretty much gave the South 90 days to end the war, and he wouldn't do anything about slavery. The 90 days is up, no states have rejoined the Union, and so here we go. Lincoln is going to formally declare that all slaves in rebel territory are free. Now, the immediate impact of this isn't very much. All the slaves that are being declared free are slaves that are sort of out of Lincoln's control. The longer-term impact of this is huge. Lincoln is pretty much making clear that there isn't going to be any slavery in the United States after the war is over if he has anything to say about it. And this is going to transform the war from a war to end secession to a war to end slavery. This is going to be somewhat controversial in the North. There were some Democrats and even some Free Soil Republicans who had been kind of on board for restoring the Union, but hadn't really been on board for ending slavery in the South where it, had existed for many years. But there's other people who are saying, we can't just, after 2 years of war, doesn't make any sense to just go back to 1859. 1859 was not a particularly stable situation. If we're going to solve this problem, we have to solve the underlying element of it, and that is slavery. So that's kind of where this is headed. Now, the other thing for Lincoln is he's issuing this as a war measure, and Lincoln is keenly aware of the fact that once the war is over, the situation might change. Will everyone recognize the freedom of these slaves once the war is over? Or, will it in fact be, sort of, the egg is broken, you can't put it back together. But in the future discussions about emancipation and what Lincoln is doing, he's going to want to, nail this thing down with something a little more than his war powers. And so that's why we're going to see additional debate going forward. On the military front, the Army of the Potomac, there's a news change in generalship. Ambrose Burnside of the impressive facial hair had his disaster in Fredericksburg in December, and so he's going to get transferred to less stringent duties in Ohio and be replaced by Fighting Joe Hooker. There's a story that goes around that the term hooker for prostitutes comes from Joseph Hooker. And while it is true that when he was sort of the military commander of Washington, D.C., there was a thriving part of town with sort of serving the needs of the soldiers in terms of bars and gambling and brothels. And it was referred to as sort of Hooker's division. But the actual term hooker for a prostitute predates Joseph Hooker by many years. But he is going to sort of have that reputation of being a, hard-drinking, hard-living kind of fellow. I'm not sure how much I believe that because remember, this is, in the middle of the Second Great Awakening, and then, if you have a glass of whiskey every day, you're considered a hard drinker. But, there you go. We'll see how successful Fighting Joe Hooker is. The Union is going to start conscription in March. You remember the Confederacy had started it much earlier. This is going to be the first U.S. conscription law. We got through the American Revolution, the War of 1812, the Mexican War. All of those were done purely with volunteers. But volunteers are clearly not going to cut it by the time we get to 1863 and the Civil War. This applies to all males aged 20 to 45, although as in the South, certain necessary occupations are exempt. And there's also a provision that if you have the means, you can hire a substitute. You can hire somebody who was not on the draft list to take your place. This is going to be pretty controversial because, rich people are going to avoid service, and recent Irish immigrants are going to be much heavily represented in the ranks of the Union Army. And how effective is a guy going to be if he's there because he was forced to do so under threat of arrest? We'll see. Meanwhile, the finances of the Confederate States are not looking good by the time we get to 1863. They are unable to borrow money for the most part. They're not looking like a very good credit risk with their trade largely interfered with. They don't have a lot of tax revenue coming in, and so they have no way to make payments on loans. So the way that the Confederates are going to largely finance their war effort is by printing money. You just sort of print it up and spend it. And if you know anything about economics, you know that that just leads to massive inflation. Inflation is kind of a stealth tax on your population. People's, savings no longer purchase what they used to. The price of basic necessities goes through the roof. The other thing that the Confederates are going to do is authorize seizure of private goods as needed. So if you have a warehouse with, some, shoes in it, and they decide that the Confederate Army needs shoes, they will seize your shoes, and they will pay you, of course, in this, worthless printed Confederate money, but that's not really much consolation if you just lost your warehouse full of shoes. All of this is going to fall much more heavily on the heads of lower income people because they have less of a cushion to be able to survive it. And the impact of that is going to be bread riots. Spring of 1863 in a number of southern cities, in particular Richmond, seat of government, riots are going to break out. Low-income people make their way to the bakery, and there either is no bread at all, or the bread that's there is, 10 times the price that it was a year ago. And in particular, these are going to be women of the lower social classes, because the men of the lower social classes have been drafted and they are in the military. And President Davis is going to have to call out soldiers to put down these riots. You can put down the riots, but that still doesn't feed people. And there's going to be increasing tension in the South between the low-income people who are barely able to scrape by under these conditions and the government, which is maintaining power not so much by the consent of the governed as by military force. And that's the situation when we get to the Battle of Chancellorsville, which is General Hooker's attempt to make his way down to Richmond. Chancellorsville is, of course, there's no I-95 then, but if you sort of imagine sort of I-95 in your brain, a little down roundabout Fredericksburg is Chancellorsville. And what Hooker was going to do is, instead of trying to cross the river at its widest point, which is where Burnside fell apart, Hooker is going to go upstream to where they can just sort of march over the river and try to do it that way. Hooker's got 130,000 soldiers, Lee's got 60,000, and Lee is going to do some interesting maneuvers at Chancellorsville, which are still going to be studied as sort of brilliant generalship. But again, it's Lee is being brilliant because he has to be. He has no choice. He's got less than half the number of soldiers that Hooker has. He can't just fight this in a conventional way. He has to be unconventional. And for now, April 1863, Lee gets lucky and defeats Hooker, sends him, cooling his heels back to Washington. But probably the biggest damage for the Southerners at this battle is Stonewall Jackson, Lee's best sub-commander, is going to be killed, ironically, by friendly fire. He goes out, does some scouting beyond the Confederate lines, and on the way back, it's getting dark, nobody can really see. There's a bunch of guys on horses, and the soldiers cut loose with their rifles, and oh my gosh, we have accidentally shot our commanding officer. And Jackson is going to die of those wounds, and Lee is going to miss him in the coming months. Meanwhile, in the West, Grant has pretty much surrounded the last remaining bastion of Confederate control on the Mississippi River, Vicksburg, Mississippi. There's a railroad bridge there, and it's the last bridge that links Arkansas, Texas, and Louisiana with the rest of the Confederacy. 33,000 Confederate soldiers end up sort of trapped in the city, surrounded by 77,000 Union soldiers. And rather than sort of assault this position, which is, very well defended and very strong, Grant opts for a siege, where he basically cuts off any food from going into the city and waits for them to get hungry enough to surrender. And that process is going to take about 40 days. Meanwhile, there's another incident, this one in South Carolina in June. A group of African-American soldiers in Union uniform are going to be guided by Harriet Tubman to some plantations in South Carolina. Their mission is to destroy the plantations and liberate the slaves. Harriet Tubman, before the war, was active in the Underground Railroad, but at that point she was operating all by herself and rescuing slaves, in the maybe 10 or 12 at a time. Now she's got an army behind her, so this is going to be much more effective. But what this is really an example of is the Union Army sort of taking the war to the civilian population. They are destroying plantations and removing slaves specifically to reduce the agricultural productivity of the South and worsen all of their economic problems. and kind of turning up the heat in yet another way to bring the war to a conclusion. That image, by the way, is from the movie Harriet. That's not a contemporary photograph, but it's reasonably accurate for how we think that whole thing went. Meanwhile, down south of the border, things are going reasonably well for the French, who are, in the process of conquering Mexico without U.S. intervention. In June, they're going to capture Mexico City, forcing President Juarez to flee his capital and make his way to northern Mexico, where he's going to spend the next few years fighting a guerrilla war against the French. At this point, Emperor Napoleon of France is attempting to arrange a ceasefire in the United States. Why does he want a ceasefire in the United States? I think it's because Emperor Napoleon wants the Confederacy to hang on as long as possible. Southern independence would be really cool, but if you can't get that, at least get all the military forces to stand down in place. That would make it even less likely that anybody from the United States is going to interfere with his operation in Mexico. So Emperor Napoleon clearly has his own agenda as he is continuing to, try to prolong conflict between North and South. All right, Hooker, after his disaster at Chancellorsville, he's going to be out. And he is going to be replaced by George Meade, who, if you have been counting, is the 6th commander of the Army of the Potomac. And almost immediately after taking command of the Army of the Potomac, we're going to get the Battle of Gettysburg. And this is a big deal. Once again, in the summer of 1863, as he had done in 1862, Lee is going to invade the North. Once again, hoping that a major victory will have some political impact. Now, at this point, I don't know if it's realistic to think that this is going to be in the form of Britain recognizing the Confederacy and sort of forcing the issue with the North. But there is sort of political issues internal to the United States going on here. Lee knows that the way that the South wins the war, if they win the war, is because the North gives up and decides that it is too difficult, going to take too long, too impossible to defeat the South. And one way to kind of send that message is by invading Pennsylvania and taking the war to civilians in the North. There's very little likelihood that he's going to get Lincoln to give up. But if he can get enough political pressure on Lincoln, maybe the issue will be taken out of Lincoln's hands. Now, we're not going to go into huge detail in the Battle of Gettysburg. People have, you can watch 2-hour movies about this. But the bottom line is Lee had some initial success, came very close to sort of breaking out of Gettysburg. And Gettysburg is only like, 20, 30 miles into Pennsylvania. If he had broken out of here and gotten away from Meade's army, all sorts of interesting possibilities would have been open, attacking Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, looping around and attacking Washington, maybe even making his way, up through Pennsylvania, cutting rail lines, all sorts of things that would cause difficulty for the North. But that's not going to happen. He is not going to break the Union lines, and he is once again going to have to retreat after invading the North. But this time, unlike Antietam, he's going to retreat having lost 1/3 of his army. Basically, this is the place where Lee's luck runs out. He's lost a lot of experienced commanders, particularly Stonewall Jackson. His army is getting stretched to the limit, and having lost 1/3 of his army at Gettysburg, those are soldiers that really at this point can't be replaced. And so this is the last time that Lee's army is going to try a a major invasion of the North. The war is not over, but the character of the war definitely shifts at this point, and most historians would identify this as the turning point of the Civil War. Not the end, but the beginning of the end. Shortly after this event, there's going to be draft riots in New York, mostly among the lower income population of the city. This is the point at which the Union draft law was actually being implemented. And so in July of 1863, you've got a lot of particularly Irish immigrants in New York who are at the point where they are going to be drafted into the army, taken away from their families, and they're not very happy about it. So this starts out as a protest against the draft. At some point, it becomes a protest against African Americans. Because there's a perception amongst these Irish immigrants that if it wasn't for those people, we wouldn't have to have this war. And in particular, I mean, there had already been a lot of tension building up as slaves left the South. Some of them are making their way to New York, and they are getting hired at lower wages than the Irish were accustomed to. So there's a lot of social turmoil going on, and it's all going to kind of blow up in July in New York. And when I say blow up, I mean blow up. 11 black men just sort of snagged off the street. Guys, this happens to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Hung from lampposts. Thousands more killed in, other ways or injured. 50 buildings destroyed by fire. I mean, the city was literally in flames. The local police were completely overwhelmed. And what finally puts the riot down is Meade sends 4,000 Union soldiers, pretty much fresh from the Gettysburg battlefield, up to restore order in New York. And I can tell you, Union soldiers who have just completed the Battle of Gettysburg are not going to be very kind and gentle with a bunch of folks who are trying to avoid the draft. So, there's not going to be a whole lot of respect here for, rights of defendants and, Miranda warnings and that kind of thing. It's pretty much soldiers with guns saying, y'all need to get under control now or we're going to shoot you. And some of them, in fact, are going to get shot. But this is one factor in enabling that 2/3 remaining of Lee's army to make their way back into Virginia. Meade has to pull off some of his soldiers for this other duty. This is also something that is going to have a long-term impact in New York. Remaining African Americans who weren't killed or injured or whatever, they are no longer going to live in Manhattan. To a large extent, they are going to move across the East River into Brooklyn, the Bronx, those areas. And those are going to continue to be African American neighborhoods, well into the future. It's, going to be a long time before black people feel comfortable in Manhattan, 150 years. You got a lot of social unrest in the South as well. Around about October 1863, a group of Confederate deserters in Jones County, Mississippi, basically they leave the army without permission. They say we've had enough of this. This war is not headed in the direction of winning. Our families are hungry and our farms are being neglected, and we're going home. Your war, not ours. And this is not the sort of thing that the Confederates are going to take lightly. But these farmers, pretty much for the rest of the war, are going to kind of hold their own. There are not enough Confederate soldiers to defeat these guys. The area of Mississippi where they live is kind of forested and swampy, and there are plenty of places where guerrilla soldiers, which is pretty much what these guys are, to sort of melt away into the piney woods during the day and make their way out at night. and, do their sabotage and that kind of thing. They were working with, to some extent, with the Union soldiers nearby. And this is sort of the sort of thing that Lincoln had been kind of hoping for all along, but it's happening on a very small scale, and only in places where people are going to be able to resist, the Confederate military power. And these people are primarily from the lower reaches of the social pyramid. These are, poor people, people who are just sort of scratching by a living, people who are not considered respectable. And we're going to come back to these folks when we talk about the aftermath of the Civil War. In September, you get the Battle of Chickamauga. Technically, it's a Confederate victory, although, once again, there's a lot of casualties, and the Confederates can't replace a lot of casualties. But it is going to kind of stop the Union Army in Tennessee, and for the time being, keep them out of Georgia. And this is the situation in November when Lincoln is invited up to Pennsylvania to speak at the dedication of the Gettysburg Cemetery. Basically, all the people killed at the Battle of Gettysburg. From July to November, the battlefield is being cleaned up. Bodies are being collected, identified, and they start a cemetery for them to be buried where they are. There's an orator that gives like a 2-hour speech because, in those days people would sit still for 2-hour speeches. And then Lincoln is supposed to deliver just a few remarks at the end of the thing. And his just a few remarks become fairly famous because he says in a very few words, basically, he defines what he thinks the war is all about.
Fourscore and 7 years ago, our fathers were out there in my most new nation. Conceived of liberty, dedicated to the proposition that all men are created. Now we are engaged in the great civil war. This is an advantage. Our nation so esteemed and so dedicated. And I'm very thankful for that. We'll come together on a question. Our lasting places.
Okay, so that's 2 minutes where Lincoln really kind of expresses what the war is all about. And he didn't say anything about secession, and he didn't use the word slavery. What he says is what the war is about defending freedom, defending democracy, government of the people, by the people, and for the people. If we don't win this war, that concept, democratic government, is going to perish from the earth. And it is the mission of the United States to make sure that doesn't happen. And it's very inspiring, but it's not just inspiring in November of 1863. This is an idea that is going to come back again and again. And it really is going to define in a lot of ways one strand of US foreign policy going forward for the rest of, certainly from then down to now. And one of the things we're going to see in the next unit is this idea that it is the mission of the United States to maintain democratic government everywhere in the world. You can pretty much draw a line from that all the way back to Lincoln and Gettysburg. And we're going to be dealing with that when we get to the 20th century, but enough of that. Also in November of 1863, Grant is going to retake Chattanooga, which is down there in southeast Tennessee, still sort of knocking on the door to Georgia, but not quite there yet. And in December of 1863, Lincoln is going to issue his proclamation of amnesty and reconciliation. And this is really Lincoln sort of planning ahead. The war is going to end, and Lincoln figures that the Union is going to win. Might not happen, in a couple of months, might be longer than that, but it's gonna happen. And Lincoln is already thinking about, okay, how do you put the country back together again? Because if the thing that we're fighting for is democratic government, we can't just sort of rule the southern states as conquered provinces. They have to have democracy. And it's not going to be easy to build democracy in the South, hold the country back together, and free the slaves. It's going to be a very tricky thing to do, and Lincoln understands that. So what he's going to try is, in a sense, it's kind of an experiment. In the 3 states that at this point are largely under Union control, Tennessee, Louisiana, and Arkansas, he's going to try to implement this plan, and if it works, it's going to be the example for other states as they are either conquered or as they agree to re-enter the Union. And the way this works is if 10% of the population of a state take a pledge, and the pledge is in the future, we will be loyal. We will recognize emancipation. We acknowledge that slavery is over in our state. And that we want to be part of the United States again. If 10% of the population is willing to make that pledge, then that 10% can elect delegates to a constitutional convention, write a state constitution, form a state government. That 10% will be the voters. And then the idea of this is, once the thing is done, more people will kind of chime in and also be willing to take the oath, and eventually you will have a loyal state. And Lincoln suggests that any property that's not slave property, and what we're really talking about here is land, because any property that's not slaves or land has largely been consumed or destroyed by the war. But land is going to be protected. Owners of land will not lose their land. And Confederates, generally speaking, are going to be pardoned. Lincoln has the presidential, pardon power. And what he's indicating is, look, you can keep fighting, and it's going to be really bad, and it's going to be unpleasant, and it's going to be difficult, and eventually you're going to lose. Or you can give up now, and you will get an easy settlement. You're not going to get your slaves. Forget about it. That's done. But you can still have your property. You can still have democratic government. We're not going to hang everybody as traitors. We're going to try and put things back together again. And Lincoln is hoping they'll take the deal. So at the end of 1863, here's the situation. Union forces are about, 3 times as much as Confederate forces. The Confederates are pretty much stuck. And part of what's putting Union forces over the top is 100,000 black soldiers, freed slaves and free blacks from the North, who have now been allowed to join the Union Army. and they are making a substantial contribution. If you look at the map, territory-wise, the South has been cut in two. The Mississippi River is completely under the control of Union forces. Tennessee and much of Mississippi, much of Arkansas are in Union hands, and also sort of eastern North Carolina. Other than that, there's still a lot of, Confederate territory still in the hands of the Confederates. But clearly things are not moving in the direction that they would like them to go. And next time we will move on to 1864.